Hello everybody, this is Shannon with Beads and Babble back with another tutorial. This is going to be another soldering tutorial. I mentioned in the basic soldering tutorial that I would show you how to solder a jump ring onto a pendant so you can make a necklace. And the way I'm going to show you is very simple, very beginner friendly. That's what I'm shooting for here. So much like the basic soldering tutorial, will need a lot of the same tools. Of course, your butane torch, and I'm going to make sure I have the butane in it. So you lift enough, I usually make sure it's full when I start. So you'll hold your torch upside down, bring in the bottle, and just press directly. It's full. And you'll know that when it bubbles up. I'll keep that one and move it over here to the side. Quick instructional on how to fill the butane torch is pretty self-explanatory, but I figured I wouldn't hurt to touch on it. We're going to use easy solder today. I've cut a few pallions here off of my easy wire solder. Now, I know that most people tell you to go with hard, start with hard, then move to medium, easy, extra easy. I'm going to break that rule just because this is going to be a beginner friendly tutorial and we're only making one soldering join. So we're going to use easy today. The reason why there's a few reasons why they say start with hard. It's got the highest silver content, so it's got the best color match. Second of all, it's stronger. The join is stronger and it gets weaker the more you go down. But regardless, I'm going to use easy solder to keep it as beginner friendly as possible. Today, I also have some Shine Right polishing pads here. Great for somebody that's just starting out and doesn't want to invest a lot, or can at that time. They can get some of these pro polish pads and they will shine up and take patina off, so you can highlight your pieces with some Sharpie marker or liver sulfur or silver black and that kind of stuff. Also a small thing of emery paper. This is good for cleaning off your solder as well. I usually wipe it before I cut it just to make sure that there's no residue or tarnish on it, because solder will tarnish as well, and you want it to be clean so it flows for you. I have a couple pliers here. They don't have to be bent nose. They can be just two pairs of pliers that you can open and close jump rings with. Sharpie marker, a half round number 2 needle file. This is just for any kind of excess solder removal that we might need to do, or also truing up the ends of the jump rings if we need to do that, because they need to be flush when you put them together. So they need to be as flush as possible for a strong join, or in this case, it won't matter so much with, my camera froze there for a moment. Sorry about that. Also some flush cutters for cutting the solder and any wire if you want to make your own jump rings. We have tutorials on that as well on the channel. Also, it doesn't hurt to have some paper towel hanging around for wiping dry your metals after they've been pickled or quenched in the water. You want them dry and without any water on them so you don't get any rust on your tools. I have a couple of prefabbed chains that I will string the pendants on after I'm done showing you how to solder the jump ring on so you can make the pendants. I have some distilled water here in a small glass container. I have my pickling solution, which I use distilled water and pH down as my pickling solution. It is an acid, so you got to be very careful and cautious when you do it. I like keeping my water one in one position and pickle in two. So first you always quench in your water, and then you can put it in the pickle after you quench, because if you quench, I've seen people do it, I don't like it. I just think it's unsafe, where they quench and pickle at the same time. Well, this is an acid, and it will, when it's in contact with that hot metal, it'll splash up. So it should be treated as acid and very cautious when you're working with it. I have some tweezers I've dedicated to soldering. I have my solder pick here. This is a brush I use for flexing if I need it. I'm also going to probably use my T-Flex, which is a flow flex, and my Bench Basic barrier flex, which just kind of helps protect the silver from fire scale and such. You can use a handy flex if you prefer a paste flex. This is a good paste flex. I don't use it as much, but I know a lot of people are a fan of it, so I brought it out just in case somebody wanted to ask, or they're thinking, can I use that? Yes, you can. And then I have, of course, my Solderite soldering surface. It's pretty beat up, yes. These are fairly inexpensive to purchase, and once they're done, I would throw them away and just get a new one. I know that you can resurface charcoal blocks, but I wouldn't suggest this on this particular one. I've never tried it myself. I don't recommend it. I also have some thin strips of copper here, and I'm using these to create the bridge to keep the two components that I'll be soldering together as flush or as level as possible. This works really great, and you can pick up cheap pieces of copper. I happened to buy these to make some cuffs, but I didn't realize how thin the metal was, so I have got a bunch of them, but I found another use for them. So, and they're nice because you can kind of bend them into different things to hold your pieces, and they're relatively cheap. Copper does get soft as you're heating it, so it will get more pliable and it'll loosen a little bit, just so you're aware of that. But it's definitely a cheap alternative to some of the other soldering tools that for holding stuff. So in a pinch, they work great. You can also use pennies, but they're a little bit thicker than what I needed. So what we'll be doing today is we'll be taking a pendant and attaching a jump ring like this to the to the component to make it a pendant. And what I did here is I took some 22 gauge sheet and cut out my disc, and then I stamped it with a little sea turtle, and then I took my jump ring, which is 4 millimeters inner diameter and 6 millimeters outer diameter, and I soldered it to the blank that I cut out. You can also pre-purchase blanks like this. You can purchase them in sterling silver, copper, brass. Those can all be soldered. And this is sterling silver, what I'm working with today, both the jump rings and the blanks or the components. Now this one is a little bit different. This one I took scrap silver that I had from previous projects, and I melted it down. This is 1.5 grams of scrap silver melted into a ball. I used my butane torch. There is a limitation to how much you can melt in, with a butane torch, but this worked just fine. And what I did is I took and melted it down into a ball on my, not on this, but on a charcoal block, and that has a divot in it for this. And I melted it down so it was like a little ball. This one is 11.4 millimeters in diameter, and it is 1.7 in thickness. So, and then I took my 2-pound brass mallet and I hammered it on a bench block till I got where I liked the thickness, and it's got a good weight to it. And I annealed it about 4 times while I was getting it to the thickness I wanted. And then I annealed it one more time and stamped it with a lotus flower. And that's a good tip, is anytime you're doing hand stamping, you should nail your metal before you start stamping. It makes it much easier, get better impressions, cleaner ones. And so we're going to move on now to soldering the jump ring onto this organically formed. And as you can see, I didn't refine the edges because I like them that way. It's more of an organic pendant, but it's really cute and it's one of a kind, unique type thing. So this one I'm going to see how many of these I need to stack up in order to get it semi-flush here. I think it's going to be 3 before. Actually, maybe 2 because I'll put the... All right, so I'm going to set my pendant down or make sure it's oriented right. And I clean this already with, and if you're unsure if your metal's clean, you can always put it in the pickle for a little bit and it'll clean it as well. So you never have to worry about whether or not your your metal's clean. Clean metal is essential for soldering as well. Now I closed this jump ring already, so you'll want to close the seam up as close as you can get it. And then I'm just going to take some emery paper, just give it just a little bit of a sand here. And then usually I'll use my tweezers to pick up things after I've cleaned the metal, just to keep it from getting dirty again with my fingers being oily or whatever have it. Then I'm just going to place the jump ring on the solderite, and I'm using 2 strips of the copper in order to hold it level so we can solder it. And now I'm using my barrier flux, my Bench Basics barrier flux. And I'm going to also put a little drop of my T-Flux, which is Flow Flux, on here. And then I'm going to light my torch. I'm not going to do any soldering yet. What I'm doing here is I'm going to just heat the flux up till it is a snowy white. And the reason I'm doing this is, as you can see how much it's dancing around and bubbling here. I'm gonna now that I have it kind of snowy white and flux, this will make it easier for the beginner. Because if you put your solder on there while the flux was liquid, it'll bounce, it could go off. Here it's less likely to do that. I'm not saying it won't, but it's less likely to do that. I'm going to take a piece of easy solder and I'm going to place it at the bottom here. And I'm going to move it to where it's touching the jump ring. I'm going to try to. I don't know what is heck might be the... Might be me. So it's touching the jump ring and the base plate there. And that's exactly what you want. Then I'm going to grab my pick in my dominant hand, my right hand, and the torch will be in my left hand. So I'm going to turn this upper light off so you can kind of get a better look at how the solder... What I'm going to be shooting for is I'm going to be focusing most of my heat on the bigger bottom plate. And then when I see this flux get a kind of brown sugar glaze, I know the solder should be flowing really soon. And then I'm going to watch for that flash over here on this other side of the jump ring. I'm going to light my torch. And I'm going to come in, focusing my heat on the larger pendant portion, not the jump ring. So you don't want to melt the jump ring. Another thing is nice about using like the copper as a bridge, and you can see it's starting to get that brown kind of sugary glaze. Oh, there goes the, yep. And sometimes you might need to take your pick and hold down the portion you're just to make sure you're getting a good solder seam there. Just want to make sure, yeah. All right, turning off my torch. I hope you were able to see the kind of brown sugary glaze that the flux took on before the solder flowed. But since this is easy solder flows really fast. And I'm letting this cool down a little bit. You can heat it up to move it off, but you don't, if you pull it up now, it'll take a piece of the solderite with you. So, and I'm also working on a ceramic tile too. It's a heat, fire resistant surface as well. I got it at, I believe, Lowe's. It's a very efficient way, very cost effective way to make yourself a little soldering station. All right, it's cooling off a lot. Hopefully I didn't solder this onto, no, I didn't. It's still holding on to the, just tapping that loose there. Put those over there. And you do not want to touch any of this because it's still hot. You can quench it. Once you quench it, you can touch it. The copper was stuck on there because of the flux. And I'm going to test the join with my fingers. I'm giving it a good tweaking, and it's on there solid. And a lot of times you could solder the jump ring closed and then on here, but I don't see any need for it because usually if you get that flush, it's going to do it all in one step when you solder it here. All right, and I'm going to put this, since I quenched it already, into the pickle and let it sit there for a little bit to clean up. Moving everything out of my way here. Turn the light back on. Zoom you out a little bit. Don't mind my poopies, they are coming down the stairs. Can you hear that? Oh my goodness. Crazy. All right, it'll take it a few, it's not going to be minutes, but a minute or so in order for that to get clean and get all the excess flux and gooey stuff off of it. Now this can be done with different size jump rings. I handmade these using 18 gauge dead soft wire, and I recommend using a thicker gauge jump ring when you're doing this. Thinner is going to melt quicker, but as you saw, that was a really good combination. Even with the thinner gauge metal, having the thicker gauge 18 gauge wire, you're less likely to melt the jump ring before you get it soldered to the back plate. So I would stick with 18 gauge when you're learning how to do this. And if you want to go thinner, to 20 gauge, you could do that once you have more practice. But that's a really good gauge to start off for beginners. You're less likely to melt your jump ring before you get it soldered to the piece that you're trying to solder it to. And like I said, these little copper pieces or brass pieces, you can use steel as well, washers, copper washers, great. I know Harbor Freight sells like a little pack of copper washers, which I bought for doing this as well, for relatively cheap as well, different thicknesses, and you can stack them and such. How this is looking pretty good. I'm going to leave it in there for a little bit longer. It had a lot of and then what in order to turn, because if you can't string this, or excuse me, you can't put the chain on this the way it says it would hang like this. You want it to hang flat. So what you're going to need to do is attach jump rings. And I usually do 2, and I don't solder these closed usually, but you can if you want to. I'm opening and closing this so I can. And then I'm just adding it to, actually I won't do that yet. I'll put the chain in there too. Also, I'll have to open them up again. Getting ahead of myself. But I will open them. I need one more. I have one more over there hanging around. You can also use a smaller jump ring too if you want. Or the connector jump ring. All right, I'm going to get it out of the pickle here. I'm going to quench it in the water again just to rinse off the acid. Use my paper towel here to clean it. Testing, got a good solder join. All right, and then I'm going to take the Pro Polish pad out, and then I'm going to grab my Sharpie, and I'm going to do what is called a quick and dirty patina on these. I'm just going over the stamped impression here of the turtle. You can also hallmark these with sterling silver or 0.925 stamps if you want. I'm making these for my granddaughter, so I wasn't too overly concerned about that. I'm just making sure I'm getting it into the impressions. Just let it sit there for a second. Now I'm using the Pro Polish pad here to wipe the unrecessed areas to sort of highlight it, and it'll bring a little bit of a shine too because it's impregnated with a polish. You can go over the entire piece, a little bit of a polish. You can also leave it, you can go over it again with like steel wool to give it more of a brushed look, which I did that with some of my Scotch Brite type rotary tool type brush. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I have to turn this one over and do it this way, a little bit smaller, harder to hold in my hand. And this, of course, is a more organic type pendant as well. And these are good for taking off any remnants that might be left behind by the flux. Usually the pickle, just leave it in there longer and it'll take off everything that shouldn't be on the metal. Just kind of going over this really fast. You can do a better polishing job if you want, if you have a Dremel or a Fordham, or you can just hand, go through different grits of sandpaper or whatever. You can do that as well. But this is just a really quick and easy way to make pendants with a very handmade feel. Personalize it with initials, however you want to do it. I'm going to grab the chain. And then I'm going to take one jump ring, add the chain, close the jump ring, grab another jump ring. I usually put 2 on here. You can you could do 1 if you want. If you like 1, you can do 1 for sure. It's really up to you what your design tastes are. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Close up this jump ring. Sorry if I'm off camera there. Out of practice. Close up this one. Make sure I'm not grabbing the chain as I'm doing it. I'm going to crush those delicate links. But as you can see, it makes a really nice, this is a more of a delicate one, but it's more organic. It's got a good weight to it when you can, and it's also recycled silver. So you can make it if you're working with a lot of wire, silver wire and such, you can make these relatively cheap, and you don't have to order any extra supplies to do it. And I always just add a second jump ring because it's just extra security for that not coming, especially if it's not going to be soldered closed, from it coming undone. And those are also 18 gauge as well. But that is a down kind of easy, no fuss, I mean, you're not getting elaborate or anything with this. Is just a simple bell using a jump ring to attach. But I feel like a beginner can start out with this and make it really nice. Make nice Christmas gifts for family members. So I'm trying to get this where it's a little bit better to see. I think it's the glare from my lights. Oh, I think that's even worse. But yeah, you can do some really cool little projects with that. Sorry, this is horrible. Horrible. I think it could be the tile too, because usually I'm using my gray mat. But that makes really cute pendants. So that's all to it. If you guys have any questions, just leave them in the comments. I will answer them. I do so myself, and I try to do it as quickly as possible. So that'll be it. Until the next time I'll be seeing you guys. I hope you guys have a great weekend.